Benchmark, the voice of business. Presented by LMD.
On this edition of Benchmark, the focus is on human resources today, and we've invited Dananjaya Hettiarachchi, CEO of Standard & Stellar Consulting, to give us his unique perspective. Then we talk to Shaheen Carter, Managing Director of Nielsen, about the BCI, which shot up by 21 basis points. And we wrap up with LMD columnist Deshal Dimel as we discuss Sri Lanka's macro outlook. That's the lineup for Benchmark.
Welcome to Benchmark, the Big Picture Business Program. I'm Savitri Rodrigo. We are delighted to welcome to our studios today Dananjaya Hettiarachchi, the founder and CEO of Standard & Stellar Consulting, Toastmaster International's world champion in public speaking in 2014, and he's also a human resource development specialist, a motivational speaker, and a corporate trainer. Good to have you in our studios.
Pleasure to be here, Savitri. Thank you for the invitation.
With all your experience that you've
Yes.
been working with the Sri Lankan workforce, how do you view them currently?
I think we're a very progressive workforce. I think especially when you look at the millennial generation and the young generations that are entering the workforce and taking middle management positions now, we're looking at a workforce which is highly ambitious, very diverse in their skills, and very progressive. Managing them, however, is a different story. But if you look at the next 10 to 15 years, this country will have a knowledge worker economy where we can leverage a lot of skills to position ourselves in the global market.
Do you feel that organizations are investing enough in leadership development?
I think organizations do invest quite an amount of money. I think at any given time, if you take a look at the training budget of an organization, 60 to 70% would be allocated to tier 1, tier 0 leadership training. But the question is, are they using that to develop the right set of skills? Now, in Sri Lanka, we have this concept saying, okay, we're sending someone for a leadership training. But leadership is an accumulation of skills, decision making, productivity, to time management. And what you need to actually send them is to that specific skill. And for that, you need to do a comprehensive study of what are the skill gaps that they have, and then allocate the budget that they need to undertake the training. But in Sri Lanka, this does not happen. We just sometimes broad-base it, and we send them to a program, but not a program that will give you the return on investment that you're looking for.
Just taking off from that, is there adequate focus on actually honing leaders' emotional intelligence quotient?
I think emotional intelligence is something that needs to be learned through association, and this is something that we're still getting around to. If you look at some of the more Western countries, they already figured this out, and that's why they have very strong mentorship programs, apprenticeship programs. Emotional intelligence, more than being taught, has to be experienced and felt. And actually, some companies here, tier 1 companies in Sri Lanka, have some form of mentorship programs that they launch, but nothing conclusive. So yes, there is a focus on emotional intelligence, but not in the right direction that would give them the return that they want.
So Dananjaya, what is your unique take on the term self-leadership?
I think self-leadership has a very internal focus. I know as leaders in organizations, they have a vision that they need to accomplish. Leadership is all about taking your vision to action. And there is a particular set of skills that you need extrinsically, managing teams, decision making, to strategy that you need to adopt. But self-leadership is the skill set and the mind frame that you require in order to achieve this. So it's actually a balance from an outward and inward perspective. Self-leadership is that frequency you need to come to, and the skill set, the attitude you need to foster in order to meet the expectations of your employer, of your boss. It could be your stakeholders, whoever. It's just garnering that self-discipline from it could be self-discipline to the self-confidence you need to really meet the expectations of the people that you're working for.
Okay, so prevailing HR practices,
Yes.
how does that focus on creating value, not only for the employees,
Sure.
not only for the organization,
Right.
but across stakeholders in
Yeah.
general?
I think HR has a lot to do with the industry you're in. I think different industries adopt different HR practices. For example, if you're in the IT industry, we now know that the ideal model is a 80-20 model, where 80% of your staff is on a contractual model and 20% is on a permanent model. So what this allows is a great level of flexibility, especially for public quoted companies. When they want to reduce staff, it becomes easier. When they want to acquire staff, it becomes easier. So at any given time, your overheads are 20%. Now this enables that industry because that industry works from the cost arbitrage between different countries, especially the offshoring model. The banking model is a little different. It's about more experience, more tenure. You got to be in the system for a while, and that has maybe it's demerits, merits, but it's a process that works with them. So HR, for me, when I look at human resource development, cannot be something that can be generalized across the board. Each industry you're in will have a particular set of HR practices, a HR framework that will really allow you to survive and gain a competitive advantage in that industry. What works in one industry cannot be kind of plugged into another industry. It's just a matter of evolving in that industry and figuring out the practices that will really work for you. And that's when HR really starts to bring value to the table.
In the current HR context, do you believe in the adage that a rolling stone gathers no moss? Or do you think experience, therefore, someone should stay in their job for 3 decades or more? Or is it that someone should be moving around and getting more experience? How does that work?
Well, today the rule of thumb is 4 years. If you haven't got a promotion in 4 years, you're never going to get it. As simple as that. Some people don't seem to realize this. It's about being attuned to what the organization is trying to tell you. Your organization can say something explicitly and also can say something implicitly. Today, in the pace that we're growing, if you are in one place for more than 4 years, this means it's time for you to make a move. If you are constantly getting a promotion every 2 to 3 years, you should continue in that same organization, and because you are making progress in that company, and you got to wait until, even if you're making progress, the second rule of thumb is figure out whether your growth is actually bigger than the organization. If you are growing faster than the organization in terms of your skills, competencies, and attitude, then it's time for you to leave. But here's the trick. If your organization is growing faster than you, and if you're challenged every day, and you are continuously being pushed up the ladder every 2 to 3 years, there is no reason for you to move, because you're already moving. Therefore, you're not gathering any moss. But if you are stuck in one place for 4 years, then it's time to change.
So we're going to continue this discussion in a little while.
Sure.
Time for a commercial break. Now, when we return, Dananjaya Hettiarachchi talks about the fear of failure, inspiring creativity, and also diversity in the workplace. Stay with us.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
We can show you a world, shining, shimmering, splendid, amazing, beautiful, dazzling, wondrous space for you and me. A whole new world, the future's got a whole new world for you.
The most advanced technology now on multiple smart devices for total convenience. Welcome to H&B New World Banking.
You're with Benchmark. We now resume our discussion with award-winning speaker Dananjaya Hettiarachchi, corporate trainer and HRD specialist as well. Dananjaya, would you agree that the fear of failure is
Yeah.
actually gripping not only individuals but also organizations as well?
100%. I think I'll start off from an individual perspective. I'm failing all the time. I've been failing throughout my life, and I think failure for me has been one of my biggest teachers. I always believe that if you're too comfortable not to fail, then you've actually stopped growing. You've stopped doing things that challenge you, you stop doing things that stretch you. And after a while, what happens is people just become uncomfortable in failing. Now, this is something that we don't have as kids. As kids, we like to experiment, we fail all the time, we just brush it off, we get up, we do it again. But unfortunately, when we become adults, we look for a certain degree of assurance that we are going to succeed. And if that level of assurance, if that threshold is not there, or perceived threshold is not there, we don't actually attempt it. Successful people actually have a different perspective. Successful people actually look at success as a number game. To them, it's about trying 1,000 things and succeeding in that one idea, which gives them, the multi-billion-dollar reward. An average person is different. An average person is waiting for that idea where there's a threshold level of success. So success, when you look at it from a purely number perspective, and if you look at the top 1% of the world, they've figured it out. They're like, try 1,000 things, you'll fail 999 times, you'll succeed in one. Now, companies, a lot of progressive companies have the same idea. They are constantly in a state of flux. They are changing every quarter from their structures, from their people, from their procedures, from their policies, and they are getting used to being in a constant rate of change. Now, some of these things will succeed, some of these things won't succeed, but what by trying companies gather is intelligence. Today, intelligence is everything. What works, what doesn't work, why didn't it work? What's the model we use? Why didn't it go right? And this intelligence can come about only if you try multiple things. So if you look at the next 10 years, the companies that will be successful will have two very specialized indicators. Number one, they will be in a constant change of flux. They will be trying new things every quarter. Number two, they will be gathering the data as to why they failed. We call this a knowledge management practice, an advanced knowledge management practice that actually looks at the things they've tried, analyzes the data, and converts this into intelligence for better decision making in the future.
So how can you inspire creativity and ingenuity among your employees?
Creativity is, once again, creativity is something that is something that's talked about across different conferences. I've been in so many conferences, and creativity is, one thing that always comes about. For me, creativity, things like emotional intelligence, we talked about it a little earlier, are things that needs to be inspired on a one-on-one basis in the workplace. I can remember working with some great CEOs in Sri Lanka. One of their biggest traits is going up to one person and then inspiring that person either to be creative or either to think laterally, just by having a chat with that person, energizing the individual. Creativity can be learned. Yes, it's something that can be learned. It's a skill that can be acquired. But to use it, you use the right word, you have to be inspired. And today in Sri Lanka, inspiration only comes from association. We have a huge lack of middle managers. We have a huge group of middle managers today in Sri Lanka that are unable to inspire the younger generation. That's one of the biggest problems we have if you look at companies in Sri Lanka. And I think the only way we can inspire creativity and ingenuity in the workplace is if we focus on the middle managers. Have a strong set of middle managers who have a particular brand, who are inspirational, that can create that inspiration at the bottom of the pyramid.
How do you actually bridge that gap, the middle management that's there, because they're the level just under them are looking up to them as role models? What do you do?
This is a huge problem today that we have. There is no particular one solution, but an organization is designed to get the result it wants. At the end of the day, that's the theory. So if you do have a problem in mid-management, it's more often than not because you've got a problem in senior management. I was in a change conference in Germany a couple of months ago, and there were big companies like DHL, big shots talking about how they've turned around their companies. They all started with when our new CEO came, and I think that says a huge statement. If you have a problem in middle management in your company, and if you have a pool of people that are not inspiring the bottom of the pyramid or not creating that value that you want, it is 100%, now 99% of the time, it's because something's wrong with you. You allowed it to happen. You've made certain excuses or allowances that has now trickled down to the rest of the organization. So this is another thing. I mean, even when I was in the US, working with big consulting firms, they always, 80% of the time, they start with sending your 3 or 4 people from the top management home, because that is the problem. And today, Sri Lanka, that is the problem, because the leadership example is not from the set. Leaders at the top are not inspiring. They're not evangelizing their products or their culture, and they expect this to happen from middle management, but it doesn't happen at the top.
The culture of inclusion,
Yes.
creating diversity in the workplace, has become a key concern.
Yeah.
How are organizations actually going about achieving that objective, and also gaining women into senior leadership positions?
Progressive companies always have a key performance indicator. They have a KPI to the gender balance, women in leadership is a KPI, and they have several HR KPIs that track diversity. So if you are a progressive company, you will definitely have at least 3 to 4 KPIs that will help you track diversity. But once again, this diversity issue the direction comes from the philosophy of the leader. So today in Sri Lanka, you have 2 things. You get companies who are leader-centric. This means the company's direction changes depending on who runs the company. The other thing is, the other type of organization is value-driven, where irrespective of who comes on board, you have 4 to 5 values that the company has been adhering from its inception, right? So what happens is, more often than not, organizations that are value-driven will have a consistent policy towards diversity, have a consistent policy towards women in leadership, have a consistent policy towards employing differently abled people, so on and so forth, ethnicity, race, and so on. It doesn't depend on the leader. Companies that are leadership-driven or leader-driven, this policy changes because it depends on the philosophy. There are companies who still believe that women should not be in the leadership. There are companies that still have a very staunch attitude towards certain things when it comes to race, gender, religion. And this is all driven from the leadership philosophy. So until companies migrate or transform into a value-driven organization, where they say diversity is a value, irrespective of who heads the organization, you will not see a huge emphasis on diversity happening in Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Dananjaya. I just hope that the next generation at least will benefit from what you're trying to do for them.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Savit.
On the other side, we have Anushan Selvaraja, who will give you a few more details about the Business Confidence Index and details of the economy.
Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC. Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company is now the nation's largest and highest rated finance company with 2 international ratings. Let us move the nation as one with People's Leasing and Finance PLC. We can show you a world, shining, shimmering, splendid, amazing, beautiful, dazzling, wondrous space for you and me. A whole new world, the future's got a whole new world for you.
The most advanced technology now on multiple smart devices for total convenience. Welcome to H&B New World Banking.
Hello and welcome back to Benchmark. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. We now take a closer look at the latest on the Business Confidence Index with the Managing Director of Nielsen, Shaheen Kader. Welcome back, Shaheen. Now, to begin with, the latest BCI is up by noteworthy 21 basis points. Now, what are the sensitivities behind this rise in the index?
So Anushan, the survey was done just prior to the general elections, and I think there were very high expectations that there will be stability instead of uncertainty, and also people expect future economic and business growth. So I think these were the factors that pushed the BCI up. We also do the consumer confidence index. So we saw the CCI also going up because of perceived greater job opportunities.
Where do respondents stand in terms of the economic and business prospects?
Well, expectations are massive, Anushan. I mean, 82% expect the business to improve compared to 62% a month earlier.
What would be your projections for the future?
Well, I think I'd say if, and I reiterate, if there is evidence of continued growth and good governance, I mean, I would expect the index to grow up sharply. But at the same time, we have to be cautious that there may be some economic shocks in the sense of devaluation or even taxation changes, which are being talked about widely by various people. So subject to that not happening, I would expect the index to continue its momentum.
Thank you for joining us, Shaheen.
Thank you.
That was the Managing Director of Nielsen, Shaheen Kader. We'll be back after a short commercial break with the latest on the economy. Stay tuned.
When we entered the industry in 1995, a new star was born as a fully owned subsidiary of People's Bank. For those seeking to grow their businesses, PLC provided the seed. We are not only Sri Lanka's #1 leasing company, but also the largest non-banking financial institution. Welcome to a new dawn for the nation. Introducing People's Leasing and Finance, PLC.
We can show you a world, shining, shimmering, splendid, amazing, beautiful, dazzling, wondrous space for you and me. A whole new world, the future's got a whole new world for you.
The most advanced technology now on multiple smart devices for total convenience. Welcome to H&B New World Banking.
Welcome back. I'm Anushan Selvaraja. Now for a closer look at the latest on our economy. Joining us is LMD columnist and economist Deshal Dimel. Welcome back, Deshal. Now, the newly formed government is likely to have its work cut out for it. But what are the biggest challenges from an economic perspective?
Yeah, Anushan, there will certainly be a lot of economic challenges that the new government will face. And most interestingly, a lot of the key issues that they will face are very politically loaded. And therefore, they won't be very easy to navigate, particularly in the context of the national government that we have seen recently appointed. If you look at a priority list, I would say the most urgent of the issues would be the fiscal situation, where we've been talking about for a while now the issues of a very slow pace of growth in government revenue, and that is coupled with the significant increases in expenditure that we have seen, particularly in the last two budgets. So because of that, you're seeing a lot of pressure building up on the fiscal front. And if you look particularly at the external debt that the government has accumulated and the repayments that are coming up over the next couple of years, there will certainly be issues that need to be navigated in that sense, and there will certainly be requirements in terms of cutting down some of the government expenditure, particularly recurrent expenditure, and doing that without compromising on your goals such as your education, health, critical infrastructure expenditure, and so on. So I would certainly think the fiscal situation is one of the most challenging. Then, of course, you have a number of other areas such as education policy, the agricultural sector, FDI, export development, and so on. And a number of these issues, many of which are politically contentious, so it'll be a tough job navigating through these.
Now, quite rightly, Desha, Sri Lanka needs educated citizens, especially to compete in global markets. What reforms are needed for the education sector in that case?
As you say, competing in the global market is going to be the crucial aspect of it. And as you know, Sri Lanka has got a relatively high cost labor force. So we don't compete on price with countries like, say, Bangladesh or Vietnam. And at the same time, we don't compete very well in terms of productivity in terms of quality with countries like, say, Thailand or Malaysia. So therefore, we need to really up the game in terms of the quality of our labor force in order to be able to produce the goods and services that can compete in terms of productivity and in terms of quality. So for that, the education sector needs to have substantial reform, and I see requirements across the board in terms of primary, secondary, tertiary as well. I think the first step in this regard is to look at where we stand. And one thing that we can do as in the sector is to take something like the PISA test, which would give you an indication of where Sri Lanka's educational outcomes stand compared to our peer countries, particularly in areas like mathematical and science performance in examination. So that way we can tell where our shortcomings are, and it will be a guide as to which areas you need to emphasize our investments in education and focus our attention. So I think the first step would be that. But overall, I think in terms of curricula, they need to change a shift in focus from an exam-centric kind of education model to one where we focus on creating skills such as creativity, analytical thinking, ability to solve problems, and so on. I think that focus needs to change, because one of the problems that is faced by the private sector now is in terms of being able to hire workers who have these kind of critical skills, which is really what is needed for innovation, for the kind of capabilities that is needed to compete in the global market. And finally, on education, I think the delivery mix also needs to be relooked at. We have seen a dominance by the state sector in education, but it's important now, I think, that we also look at greater private sector participation. And of course, there are equity issues that need to be looked at here, but from a gradual perspective, in the longer term, we need to have a better mix between private and public education delivery as well.
What about our agricultural policy, Deshal? What are your thoughts on the changes that are needed for this sector?
In agriculture, Anushan, I think one of the problems that we have is we've had an emphasis on the domestic sector, where our agricultural resources are largely catering to the domestic market, where we try to be self-sufficient in a number of different areas, and that has been supported by having a very strong protectionist tendencies in agriculture with very high import duties and so on. What has happened as a result of this is that we've had a lot of resources going into agriculture, into areas that are not necessarily productive, areas where Sri Lanka is not necessarily globally productive. And I think that needs to change. In the long term, I think we need to look at shifting into, even in agriculture, into segments within agriculture where we are globally competitive. And in those areas, then you'd end up seeing better productivity, better returns to labor, better returns to capital, and so on as well. So again, I think we need to relook at this, the protection that we have in agriculture. Of course, again, there would be social and equity issues to consider. So it's not going to happen overnight. But in the longer term, I think we need to shift our overall agricultural policy focus from a protected domestic market focused agriculture into one that links in with global value chains, so that we tap into the higher value export segments in agriculture as well. I think that should be the long-term focus in agriculture.
Thank you for joining us, Deshal.
Thank you, Anish.
That was economist and LMD columnist Deshal Timel. Thank you for watching Benchmark, and we hope to see you again next time.